In the distant Qualtaquan galaxy, the Grand Councilwoman calls an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The reason is urgent. Her guards have captured a bizarre life form that was engineered in a lab by a scientist named Jumba. She publicly condemns Jumba, reminding him that his assignment was to study biological threats safely, not invent new ones. Jumba looks genuinely confused by the outrage. According to him, the being they've apprehended, Experiment 626, isn't some mindless monster. He brags that 626 is his greatest work, a living weapon designed to be unstoppable, nearly indestructible, and intelligent beyond machines. The Council isn't impressed. To them, 626 is a disaster waiting to happen. The Councilwoman offers the creature a chance to prove there's goodness inside him by simply speaking for himself. But when 626 gets the floor, he treats the whole hearing like a game, joking, fooling around, and refusing to show any sincerity. That's all the Councilwoman needs. She declares him irredeemable and orders him exiled. Jumba's lab will be destroyed, and Jumba himself will be imprisoned. Guards drag him away as 626 is moved to a secure facility to await transport. It doesn't last long. 626 outsmarts the containment systems almost immediately, breaks free, steals a spacecraft, and escapes before anyone can stop him. The Councilwoman orders pursuit, but her pilots report that the stolen craft has already jumped into hyperspace. They calculate his likely destination, a small blue world called Earth. One pilot notes the planet is mostly water. The Councilwoman explains why that matters. Water increases 620 molecular density, meaning he becomes too heavy to swim and could drown. She almost seems satisfied until further projections suggest he'll likely survive the landing anyway. Her disappointment is obvious. Back at the prison corridor, Jumba can't resist one last remark. It'll take a genius to catch something like his creation. He offers a solution. Release him, and he'll retrieve 626 himself. The Councilwoman refuses at first, furious at what he built, even threatening that if 626 can't be contained, Earth could be vaporized. That's when an agent named Pleakley rushes in, proudly presenting himself as an Earth expert. He warns that destroying Earth is prohibited because the planet is classified as a protected wildlife reserve. With that in mind, the Councilwoman changes course. She orders Jumba to travel to Earth and bring 626 back alive, while Pleakley is assigned to supervise him and ensure he follows Federation rules. Pleakley is delighted. Jumba is not. On Earth, on a sunny island, a lonely girl named Lilo begins her day in her own strange way. She drops a sandwich into the ocean for a fish she believes needs feeding. Then she heads to hula class, hoping, like always, that today might be different. It isn't. She shows off a handmade friendship bracelet to a group of girls trying to connect. They laugh at it. Myrtle, the loudest voice in the group, tells her she can't have a friendship bracelet because she doesn't have any friends. Lilo tries to swallow the hurt, but it sticks. Soon the class is called to perform. Lilo scans the crowd for her sister Nanny, but Nanny isn't there. Lilo's face falls. Nanny had tried. She even left work to make it in time, but her old truck broke down on the way. During the performance, Myrtle deliberately trips Lilo and sends her tumbling. No one steps in. No one corrects it. Lilo snaps, shoves Myrtle off the stage, and the room erupts. The teacher stops everything immediately. When Nanny finally arrives, the show is long over and Lilo has already gone home. Nanny rushes back to the house and finds the door locked. She apologizes through it, but Lilo doesn't want excuses. She wants her sister to show up. Before Nanny can calm her down, a car pulls up outside. A social worker, Mrs. Kikoa, has arrived. Nanny urgently begs Lilo to open the door. Lilo refuses. So Nanny rushes her to the back entrance, slips inside first, and tries to make the house look presentable, cleaning in a panic while pleading with Lilo to cooperate. Kikoa follows, noticing the weird detour but not commenting. The moment she steps inside, chaos greets her. A pot is overheating on the stove, and smoke curls toward the ceiling. Kikoa moves to help and reaches toward the smoke detector, only for Lilo to casually mention she removed the batteries because it always goes off. Nanny immediately tries to deny responsibility. Then Kikoa notices a cut on Lilo's arm and asks what happened. Lilo, with no filter, says she got it practicing how to jump out of her bedroom window. Kikoa looks shocked. Nanny quickly tries to stop Lilo from saying anything else that could sound even worse. When Kikoa asks how Lilo is doing emotionally, Lilo abruptly switches into perfect child mode, repeating sweet, polite lines that sound suspiciously rehearsed. Kikoa isn't fooled. She tells Nanny the meeting didn't go well. She acknowledges the girls haven't had long to grieve their parents, but reminds Nanny that her job is to ensure Lilo is in a stable environment. Kikoa mentions a new director will soon be arriving, and she'd like to tell them the girls are doing well, if Nanny can show real improvement. She gives Nanny goals: clean the home, keep the fridge stocked, stay current on bills, and file for health insurance. Nanny promises she'll do it. The second Kikoa leaves, Nanny scolds Lilo for sabotaging the meeting, warning that acting like that could get them separated. Lilo snaps back that Nanny should stop acting like their mom and storms to her room. Outside, Nanny's neighbor Tutu sees the stress in her face and calls it immediately. The social worker visit didn't go well. Nanny admits it. Tutu complains about Kikoa's constant smiling, but Nanny reminds her their future might depend on her. Tutu refuses that thinking, insisting Nanny's future is in her own hands and that she's smart enough to make something bright. Then Nanny brings up the college letter she threw away, only for it to somehow end up back in her bag. Tutu admits she put it there and urges Nanny to consider it. It's her dream school, a real path toward marine biology. Nanny says she can't go. Lilo needs her. Tutu keeps trying anyway. Right then, David, Tutu's grandson, returns from the beach and greets Nanny warmly. He asks when she'll surf again. Nanny jokes, maybe when Lilo turns 18. David looks confused because it doesn't sound like a joke at all. Later that night, Nanny tries to repair the damage between them. She brings Lilo food and tells her she isn't bad. She just does bad things sometimes and can do better. Lilo asks why people treat her differently. Nanny says sometimes people don't know what to say to someone who feels different, and they handle it wrong. High above Earth, Experiment 626's stolen craft begins to malfunction. The controls glitch and the ship lurches wildly. It plummets through the atmosphere and crashes into the woods like a meteor. Lilo sees it from her window and assumes it's a shooting star. She sends Nanny out of the room and makes a wish with all her heart. She wants a real friend. In the forest, 626 survives the crash, shaken but alive. Not long after, he feels sudden jolts from the collar around his neck. Jumba, now on Earth, is testing a control device meant to subdue him. Pleakley snatches it away, scolding him for being reckless and reminding him the collar has a tracker. They can follow the signal. Not for long. 626 soon stops getting shocked and manages to remove the collar entirely. Pleakley panics as the tracker's signal dies. Jumba stays calm, saying they can begin at the collar's last recorded location and search outward. Meanwhile, 626 stumbles into human society and instantly causes trouble. He wanders into a wedding, sees cake, and disrupts the entire party as guests recoil in shock. People try to grab him, but he's too fast and slippery to catch. He bolts out into the road and gets hit by a bus. By morning, Jumba and Pleakley have established a base at a resort, using their technology to disguise themselves as humans. Pleakley keeps insisting they must blend in. Jumba is impatient, even casually opening portals like it's normal. As they leave the resort the regular way, a news report catches their attention. A strange animal hit by a bus has been taken to the local animal shelter. They don't need more clues. They head there immediately. At the same time, Lilo is nearby with Tutu. Lilo begs to visit the shelter, and Tutu gives in. Inside, 626 wakes in a cage, surrounded by dogs staring at him like he doesn't belong. He breaks out and tries to escape, only for Jumba to arrive and start firing tranquilizer darts. 626 dodges every shot and ducks back into the shelter for cover. That's when he sees an adoption poster, a child hugging a dog. The idea clicks instantly. He shifts his posture and expression, forcing himself into something more pet-like, still weird but close enough to pass at a glance. Lilo sees him and freezes. She's never seen a dog like that. But curiosity wins. He greets her, and she's stunned, because he speaks as if he understands her. Tutu and the shelter worker try to keep him back. Lilo insists he can talk, but Tutu reminds her dogs aren't supposed to talk. 626 hears that and immediately starts barking, pretending to be normal. Lilo begs to adopt him. After hesitation, Tutu agrees. They leave with 626 as their new dog. Outside, Pleakley and Jumbo watch in disbelief. Pleakley realizes 626 is using Lilo as a human shield. Jumbo still wants to shoot, but Pleakley blocks him, warning he could hit the child. In the struggle, Pleakley gets darted instead and stumbles woozy as 626 escapes again, this time on a leash. At home, Nanny is against the pet immediately. They can't afford another responsibility. Tutu argues it might bring joy into the house. Nanny reluctantly compromises. One day. That's it. Elsewhere, a serious agent named Cobra arrives at the crash site of the unknown craft. Other officers report there's no pilot and no tracks. Cobra doesn't like that. He suggests the pilot might not have walked away. The others doubt anything extraterrestrial is involved, but Cobra mentions an odd detail. A strange animal was found on the road the same night as the crash. Now he's paying attention. Later, Tutu takes Lilo and the dog out and tells them to wait near an ice cream shop while she runs an errand. While they wait, 626 watches a monster on a TV display and mimics it, hunched, snarling, practicing menace like its instinct. Myrtle walks by, and Lilo proudly shows her new pet. Myrtle calls it ugly, crushing Lilo's excitement. Before Lilo can even respond, a kid rolls up in a toy car. 626 becomes obsessed. He shoves the kid out, climbs in, and when Lilo hops in too, he starts messing with the wiring, making it accelerate faster than it should. Down the road, Jumba half-drags a woozy Pleakley when they spot the tiny car speeding away. Pleakley guesses 626 is heading toward a city for maximum destruction, until he remembers they're on an island. The car eventually reaches the end of the road and stops at the ocean. 626 stares out, clearly disappointed there's no big city anywhere. Lilo, completely unaware of his intentions, cheerfully comments how nice it is living somewhere without huge cities. She takes him to the beach. 626 seems afraid of the water, but Lilo keeps him busy with games anyway. On the ride to Nanny's next job, 626 refuses to sit still and claws the seats apart. Nanny groans about having to sew them back together. That's when Lilo names him Stitch. On the road, Nanny nearly hits Jumba, who's still dragging Pleakley. Jumba spots Stitch inside the truck and subtly flicks a tracker underneath the vehicle so he can follow later. At the restaurant where Nanny works, she orders Lilo to sit quietly with Stitch and cause no trouble. Lilo promises. Nanny starts her shift. David shows up, and Lilo announces she got a dog. David doesn't buy it, but Lilo insists. Stitch slips away to explore. Lilo catches up, and he sprays water on her. Lilo laughs and plays along. For a moment, it's harmless. Then Stitch escalates. He grabs a stick, tries some trick, and accidentally starts a fire. The restaurant erupts into chaos. Customers evacuate, and Nanny is fired on the spot. As Nanny drives home in bitter silence, Pleakley and Jumba arrive too late and realize Stitch is moving again. The Grand Councilwoman calls Pleakley, furious they still haven't captured 626. Pleakley promises they're close, trying to sound confident while everything is unraveling. At home, Nanny is furious. Lilo offers to bathe Stitch. Nanny calls David to vent about the new mess in their lives. Nearby, Cobra listens because he's already bugged the house. Bath time becomes a full-blown chase. Stitch bolts, tears through the home, and scatters everything. Nanny finally snaps and declares they're taking him back to the shelter tomorrow. Lilo panics. She says Stitch is family now, and in their family, no one is left behind. Nanny doesn't want to hear it. Lilo pushes harder, asking why Nanny is going against what their parents taught them. That breaks Nanny. She admits the truth. Their parents are gone. They were left behind. Lilo needs to face reality. Nanny doesn't know what the social worker will say when she discovers Nanny's job situation. Cobra hears all of it and calls a colleague to get him in touch with Kikoa. Later, Lilo finally calms Stitch. She shows him old photos of Nanny, top student, champion surfer, full of potential. Stitch listens, unusually quiet. Lilo asks if he has a family. He doesn't even understand the word at first. When she explains what it means, he admits he doesn't have one. Lilo feels sorry for him and says maybe that's why they met. Then she teaches him hula. Stitch learns quickly, like he's trying. The next day, Kikoa arrives with Cobra, introducing him as the new social services director. Nanny is confused, thinking the director isn't due until next week. Kikoa says the case has been escalated. While she talks bills and responsibilities with Nanny, Cobra discreetly takes a hair sample from Stitch. Soon after, Nanny takes Lilo and Stitch around town again to find work. It goes badly. Lilo and Stitch unintentionally ruin her chances, leaving employers unimpressed. Nanny looks lost until Lilo spots an ad for a surfing instructor. She frames it as the perfect job, something Nanny actually loves. Nanny tries, and she gets it. At the beach, Nanny teaches surf lessons, and for the first time in a while looks like herself, focused, skilled, even happy. Lilo joins her, proud. Stitch stays wary of the ocean, still uneasy around water. Then he sees a normal dog riding a surfboard. Something shifts. Stitch signals he's ready to try. But the moment he does, Pleakley and Jumba appear behind them and begin firing darts. Cobra sees it and looks stunned. Someone else is hunting the creature. He calls for an extraction team, but is told to wait until the lab finishes analyzing the hair sample. In the chaos, Stitch dodges the darts, until he loses control and falls into the water with Lilo and Nanny. Nanny lunges to save Lilo, then notices something horrifying. Stitch is pushing Lilo back toward the water. David swims out to help. Nanny shouts for him to pull Stitch away. Nanny knocks Stitch off, and Lilo is saved. Afterward, Nanny takes Lilo to the hospital. The doctor confirms she's okay, then asks for insurance. Nanny freezes. She never filed. She never caught up on the checklist. Kikoa arrives and helps with the bill, but her tone is firm. She says it's time for Nanny to do what's best for Lilo. She tells Nanny she needs to officially relinquish guardianship. They can begin the process and still allow the sisters some time together before Lilo is placed with another family. That night, Nanny sits with Lilo and tries to explain that things are getting worse. With Stitch and everything that happened, their situation has gone from bad to worse, and change is coming. Lilo quietly pats Nanny's leg, and Nanny breaks, unable to say the words about Lilo leaving. She steps outside to breathe. Inside, Stitch stands in a corner, miserable, realizing he helped push the family toward collapse. When Lilo goes outside and she and Nanny sing softly about family, Stitch watches, disappointed, and slips out of the house. Elsewhere, the Grand Councilwoman calls Pleakley again and declares the deal is over. They failed. She's sending another agent to clean up the mess and orders Pleakley to arrest Jumba and bring him back. Jumba refuses. After the call, he opens a portal and dumps Pleakley into another room, deciding he's done following rules. He's going to do this his way. The next morning, Kikoa and Cobra arrive to take Lilo. Nanny still hasn't told her. Kikoa urges her to do it now. Nanny enters Lilo's room and finds it empty. Everyone panics. Nanny, Kikoa, Cobra, David, and Tutu spread out to search. Lilo, meanwhile, has gone to the shelter. She tracks Stitch there and admits she thought she lost him. Stitch refuses to go back. He says he's breaking her family apart and calls himself bad. Lilo pushes back. He isn't bad. He just does bad things sometimes. And he doesn't have to be perfect. He's family. Jumba arrives through a portal and orders Stitch to come with him. Lilo stands in the way. While Jumba is distracted, Stitch snatches the portal gun. Jumba laughs, until Stitch uses it expertly creating a portal loop that traps Jumba in a repeating fall. Stitch and Lilo head home, but the house is empty. Eventually, Jumba breaks the loop by dropping his disguise and returning to his true form so he can regain control. He traces Stitch back to the house. Lilo and Stitch attempt to escape again, but Jumba pauses, convinced there's something important inside. He heads toward the parents' room like he's about to destroy what remains. Lilo runs back in to confront him. Before Jumba can hurt her, Stitch defends her. They fight violently, tearing the house apart further. Pleakley suddenly bursts in. Lilo panics and hits him with pepper spray, dropping him in agony. Stitch overpowers Jumba and slams him down. Jumba stops fighting and tries a different strategy. He turns to Lilo and says Stitch only picked her at the shelter to use her for protection. Lilo is shocked. She asks Stitch if it's true. Stitch can't answer. Jumba says if Stitch truly cares, he'll leave, because staying is tearing her family apart. Stitch drops the portal gun and silently agrees to go. Jumba collars him again, opens a portal to his ship, and leads him away. The battered house begins to collapse from the damage. Tudu sees the ruin from afar and calls David and Nanny to check the home. When they arrive, Lilo is missing. Pleakley crawls out of the rubble, briefly revealing his true alien form before switching back into his human disguise to calm them. Cobra cuffs him and reveals he's CIA. Nanny doesn't care about any of that. She demands to know where Lilo is. Pleakley says she's on a ship about to leave Earth. Cobra starts dragging Pleakley away to take him in, but Nanny begs him to help instead. Cobra hesitates, then chooses to help Nanny. On Jumba's ship, Lilo has secretly stowed away. Jumba, unaware, talks openly about his plan, remove Stitch's empathy, restore him to pure destruction, then use him to overthrow the Grand Councilwoman and take control of the Federation. Stitch doesn't want that. When he spots Lilo, he creates a distraction to lure Jumba away from the controls. Lilo tries to free Stitch and hits the wrong button, nearly exposing herself. Jumba turns suspicious. She quickly hits the right control and opens Stitch's cage. Stitch attacks immediately. In the struggle, he opens the ship's hatch and the wind screams through the cabin, dragging Jumba toward the exit. Lilo hits a control that disrupts his disguise, forcing him into a human form, heavy, vulnerable, before he's blown out into the ocean below. Back on land, Pleakley's tracker helps Nanny and the others locate the ship as it spirals toward the water. Inside, the ship begins to fail. Stitch hesitates and tells Lilo to jump without him. Lilo refuses and grabs his hand, insisting they go together. As they prepare to leap, a photo of Lilo's parents flies from her pocket. Stitch reaches for it instinctively, trying to save it. That moment costs them. The ship slams into the ocean. Nanny and David swim toward the crash site. Underwater, Lilo gets trapped and starts to run out of air. Stitch dives after her, saving her just before she drowns. But as they try to swim upward, Stitch grows heavier, sinking again. Lilo can't lift him. When Nanny and David arrive, Lilo begs them to help Stitch, but they focus on saving her first. Lilo reminds Nanny, family never gets left behind. Nanny dives down for Stitch. She can't bring him up normally, so she drags him toward shore instead, fighting his weight until she reaches land. Stitch is unconscious. They try a defibrillator. It fails. Pleakley says they need something stronger. Lilo suggests jump-starting him using Nanny's truck battery. They do it. For a brutal moment, nothing happens. Lilo collapses, devastated, and Stitch gasps back to life. Lilo hugs him immediately, refusing to let go. Shortly after, the Grand Councilwoman arrives on Earth with her guards to take Stitch. Lilo refuses, insisting he can't be taken away. The Councilwoman says he's too dangerous to stay. Stitch quietly asks to say goodbye. She allows it. He hugs Lilo and Nanny. The Councilwoman watches, stunned, and asks who they are. Stitch answers simply, his family. Pleakley suggests letting Stitch stay with them. The Councilwoman says someone must monitor him. Pleakley volunteers to remain on Earth. The Councilwoman also worries about public exposure. Cobra promises he won't report anything to his CIA superiors. With those conditions, the Councilwoman agrees, Stitch will serve as exile on Earth. Lilo is overjoyed. The councilwoman departs with her guards, and with Jumba in custody. When the group returns home, they're shocked at how damaged the house is. As they talk about rebuilding, Kikoa arrives with a plan to prevent the sisters from being separated. Tutu has offered to take Lilo in officially, on paper, so the case meets stability requirements while keeping the girls together. Nanny thanks Tutu. Lilo, thinking about Nanny's dreams now, tells her she wants Nanny to go to college for marine biology because their parents would want that. Nanny tries to refuse, insisting her responsibility is Lilo. Tutu stops her and tells her that taking care of family includes taking care of herself. Lilo will be okay with Tutu and David. Nanny should go make her family proud. So they rebuild, literally and emotionally. The house begins to come back together piece by piece, with help from everyone, even Pleakley and Cobra. In time, Nanny finally leaves for college, knowing Lilo is safe and loved. After losing their parents, Nanny and Lilo were forced to survive too soon, nearly torn apart by money, pressure, and grief. Stitch entered their lives as a runaway experiment, originally using Lilo for protection and making everything worse by accident. But he changed. He chose to save Lilo, even knowing the ocean could kill him. And in the end, he earned what he never had, a family that refused to leave him behind. On Earth, in the one place he was never supposed to belong, Stitch finally did. Analysis. What if I told you that one of Disney's strangest, loudest, most chaotic animated films has now been reborn as a live-action movie in an era where Disney remakes are, let's be honest, controversial at best? Yeah, today we're talking about Lilo and Stitch, a movie that arrives carrying huge emotional baggage. Not just because fans love the original, but because this story means something deeply personal to a lot of people. This isn't just a movie about a blue alien causing mayhem in Hawaii. It's about grief. It's about broken families. It's about loneliness, otherness, and that one word Disney accidentally turned into a philosophy. Ohana. So the real question is, did this remake understand the soul of Lilo and Stitch? Or did it just recreate the surface? Today, we're doing a full deep dive cinematic breakdown. No dash opinions. No hot takes for clicks. We're talking story, characters, themes, visuals, music, performances, and most importantly, whether this film earns its place next to the original or gets lost in Disney's remake machine. By the end of this video, you'll know whether Lilo and Stitch 2025 is a heartfelt reimagining or another reminder that nostalgia is a dangerous thing. So grab a seat, and let's talk about family, chaos, and the alien who accidentally became one of Disney's most human characters. Lilo and Stitch 2025 is a live-action / CGI hybrid family sci-fi drama comedy produced by Disney as part of its ongoing reimagining of animated classics. The film is directed by Dean Fleischer-Camp, a filmmaker known for blending grounded emotional storytelling with unconventional characters, which, on paper, makes him a surprisingly strong fit for this material. The screenplay is based on the original 2002 animated film, with updates meant to bring the story into a modern emotional and cultural context. The runtime lands just under 2 hours, the language is English, and the setting remains Hawaii, an essential part of the story's identity. This isn't a fantasy location. It's a real place with real cultural weight, and the movie clearly knows that. What's important here is that Lilo and Stitch isn't being treated like a fairy tale remake. It's being framed as a character-driven family drama first, with science fiction chaos layered on top. That creative choice defines almost everything that follows. At its core, Lilo and Stitch 2025 tells a very small, very human story, even when aliens are involved. We meet Lilo, a young girl growing up in Hawaii, deeply imaginative, emotionally isolated, and struggling to find her place in a world that doesn't quite understand her. She lives with her older sister Nanny, who is doing everything she can to hold their family together after a devastating loss. And that's where this version immediately plants its flag. The grief is heavier here. More grounded, more uncomfortable. Into this already fragile household crashes Stitch, a genetically engineered alien experiment designed purely for destruction. He escapes intergalactic authorities and ends up on Earth, where he is mistakenly adopted as a dog. What follows is not just chaos, it's collision. Lilo sees Stitch as a friend. Nanny sees him as another responsibility she absolutely does not have time for. And Stitch, well, Stitch doesn't even see himself as a person yet. Meanwhile, external pressures close in. Social services question Nanny's ability to care for Lilo. Alien forces hunt Stitch, and the family is slowly pulled apart by systems that don't care how much love exists, only how functional it looks on paper. The movie carefully avoids rushing its big emotional beats. It lets moments breathe. It lets silences hurt. And without spoiling anything, the core journey here is about whether broken people can choose to belong to each other, even when they don't know how to be whole yet. Let's start with Lilo. This version of Lilo is quieter, sadder, and more realistic. She's still strange, still funny, still obsessed with things that don't fit in, but the loneliness behind her behavior feels sharper. She's not quirky for laughs. She's coping. Lilo's emotional arc revolves around control. In a world where everything has already been taken from her, she clings fiercely to anything that feels permanent, even if that thing is wildly destructive. Then there's Nanny, who might be the emotional backbone of the entire movie. This film understands something crucial. Nanny is still a kid herself. She's grieving. She's exhausted. She's terrified of failing. And the film doesn't frame her as the responsible one. It frames her as someone drowning under expectations she never asked for. Her relationship with Lilo is messy, loving, and painfully real. And then we have Stitch. Stitch isn't immediately lovable here, and that's intentional. He's violent, selfish, reactive. He doesn't understand empathy because he was never meant to. Watching Stitch slowly absorb the concept of family, not through lectures, but through observation, is one of the film's strongest emotional threads. The supporting characters, including the alien pursuers and human authority figures, function less as villains and more as systems. They're not evil. They're indifferent, and that makes them scarier. At its heart, Lilo and Stitch 2025 is about chosen family, but more specifically, it's about imperfect family. This film rejects the idea that healing is neat, that love fixes everything. Instead, it argues that love is often messy, exhausting, and deeply inconvenient, and that choosing it anyway is what makes it meaningful. Grief is everywhere in this movie. It's in the silences between Lilo and Nanny. It's in the way Stitch destroys things before they can leave him. Loss shapes every decision these characters make. Stitch himself becomes a symbol of trauma, created for destruction, conditioned to believe he has no place. He mirrors Lilo's internal belief that she is too much for the world. The recurring motif of Ohana is treated less like a slogan and more like a responsibility. Family doesn't mean everything is okay. It means you don't get to walk away when it isn't. And that's a heavy message, especially for a Disney movie. Dean Fleischerkamp directs this film with surprising restraint. Instead of chasing spectacle, he prioritizes intimacy. Scenes are often shot at eye level. Conversations linger. Emotional beats aren't undercut by jokes. The tone walks a delicate line between grounded realism and playful absurdity. And for the most part, it works. The alien elements feel strange on purpose. They don't blend in seamlessly. They disrupt the world, just like Stitch disrupts the family. This isn't a director trying to out-Disney Disney. It's a filmmaker trying to humanize something inherently fantastical. Visually, the film leans into natural light, warm colors, and handheld intimacy. Hawaii is not romanticized as a postcard. It's lived in. Beaches aren't always sunny. Homes feel cramped. Locations feel personal rather than cinematic. Stitch's CGI design deserves special mention. He looks real enough to exist in the space, but still stylized enough to retain his animated personality. His expressions are subtle, relying on body language more than exaggerated cartoon faces. Costumes are simple. Sets feel worn. and that visual groundedness makes the emotional moments hit harder. Music is used sparingly and smartly. Classic Elvis influences return, but they're woven into scenes rather than dropped for nostalgia alone. The score favors soft instrumentals that support emotion rather than dictate it. Silence plays a huge role here. Arguments don't always have music underneath. Pain isn't always scored, and that choice gives the film confidence. Sound design during Stitch's chaotic moments contrasts sharply with the quiet domestic scenes, reinforcing how disruptive trauma can feel inside a fragile space. The performances are grounded across the board. The actress playing Lilo brings vulnerability without overplaying sadness. Her awkwardness feels lived in, not performed. Nanny's performance is arguably the strongest in the film, capturing exhaustion, love, anger, and fear sometimes within the same scene. Stitch, despite being CGI, benefits from expressive animation and strong voice work that slowly evolves from noise to emotion. The chemistry between Lilo and Nanny feels authentic, like siblings who love each other but don't always like each other. The editing favors longer scenes and fewer cuts. Some viewers may find the pacing slower than expected, but that's a deliberate choice. This movie wants you to sit with discomfort. There's no flashy nonlinear structure here. The story unfolds naturally, mirroring the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. At just under 2 hours, the runtime feels justified, though a few middle sections could have benefited from tighter trimming. This film exists in a complicated cultural moment. Disney's live-action remakes are often accused of being soulless, corporate, or unnecessary. Lilo and Stitch pushes back against that by choosing emotional specificity over spectacle. It also arrives at a time when conversations about grief, mental health, and non-traditional families are more visible, making its themes feel timely rather than recycled. Importantly, the film makes an effort to treat Hawaiian culture with respect, avoiding caricature and leaning into authenticity wherever possible. One powerful interpretation is that Stitch represents unprocessed trauma. He lashes out because destruction is the only language he was taught. And the film suggests that healing doesn't mean erasing who you were. It means learning how to live with it without hurting others. The ending, without spoiling details, leaves space for interpretation. Not everything is perfectly fixed. Not every wound disappears. And that ambiguity feels honest. There are subtle visual callbacks to the original film, Easter eggs for longtime fans, and moments that reframe iconic scenes through a more mature lens. Early reactions to Lilo and Stitch 2025 have been mixed but passionate. Critics have praised its emotional depth and grounded approach, while some audiences struggle with its slower pace and heavier tone. What's clear is that this film sparks conversation about what remakes should be and about how children's stories can grow up without losing their heart. Its legacy may not be box office numbers, but emotional resonance. The film's greatest strength is its sincerity. It genuinely cares about its characters. Its biggest weakness is that it may not satisfy viewers expecting a bright, fast-paced family comedy. This version is quieter, sadder, more reflective. Some humor from the original is toned down. Some chaos is restrained. And depending on your expectations, that's either a flaw or a strength. So, is Lilo and Stitch 2025 worth watching? Yes, if you're open to a remake that prioritizes emotion over nostalgia, character over spectacle, and healing over happiness. This isn't the Lilo and Stitch you remember, but it understands why that story mattered. My final rating, 8 out of 10. If you love the original for its heart, not just its humor, this movie might surprise you, and maybe remind you that family doesn't mean perfect. It means staying. Reviews. Disney's Lilo and Stitch has always had a special place in the character lineup for me. Stitch especially. He's chaotic, adorable, and strangely emotional in a way that sneaks up on you. So when the 2025 live-action version landed, I didn't need convincing. I'm usually skeptical about live-action remakes of animated classics. Some work, plenty don't, and after a certain recent Disney misfire, I felt like the studio needed a win. This one, It comes surprisingly close to being exactly that. The story drops us into Hawaii with Lilo, a kid who's lonely, misunderstood, and getting pushed around at school. She's not quirky in the cute movie way. She's genuinely isolated, and the film makes you feel that. Her older sister Nanny is doing everything she can to keep their lives together after losing their parents, but it's clear she's exhausted, overwhelmed, and constantly one bad day away from everything collapsing. The movie doesn't treat that struggle like background noise either. It's a big part of the heart of the whole thing. Things escalate after a school incident that puts Lilo on the radar in a way that nobody wants. Suddenly, it's not just teachers and classmates. Social services gets involved, and the threat becomes real. Lilo could be separated from Nanny. In the middle of all that, Lilo makes this wish, something like asking the universe for an angel, or at least somebody who won't leave. And that's when she ends up at the local shelter. She's looking through the dogs and finds this thing. It doesn't quite fit. It's not exactly cute, not exactly normal, and it gives off major "this animal bites" energy. Naturally, that's the one she picks. She names him Stitch, and from the moment he steps in her world, the movie shifts into that perfect blend of comedy, warmth, and controlled chaos. Of course, Stitch isn't just an odd stray. He's basically a walking disaster with a genius brain, super strong, practically impossible to hurt, faster than he should be, and wired to break anything he touches. And that stray dog act? Yeah, he's actually a runaway alien experiment that was never meant to be on Earth in the first place. Meanwhile, we get the alien side of the plot, and honestly, it's where the movie gets really fun. There's a ruling alien authority that wants Stitch captured, and they send down a mismatched pair to retrieve him, an Earth specialist, agent, and the scientist responsible for creating him. The dynamic between those two brings a lot of energy to the movie. One is trying to keep the mission organized, the other is the kind of guy who would definitely build something illegal and then act offended when people get mad about it. On top of that, you've got Cobra Bubbles, part intimidating, part oddly calm, investigating what's going on. In most movies, a character like that can feel like a generic obstacle, but here he adds tension without taking over the story. He's serious, but not cartoonish, and his presence makes the whole alien chaos in a small community angle feel like it has consequences. Now, I'll be clear. I came for the Stitch antics, but I stayed for the relationship growth. The best scenes are the ones that focus on Lilo and Stitch learning each other. Lilo doesn't just tame him. She recognizes what he is, something created to destroy, but still capable of choosing something else. And Stitch's evolution is genuinely satisfying. You see him go from pure impulse and survival mode to actually caring, even when it costs him. That said, if I could tweak one thing, and I would if I had the power, it's this. I wanted a bigger final threat, something that forces Stitch to fully step into the protector role in a bold way. So here's the minor story change I wish the movie leaned into more. Instead of just a retrieval mission going sideways, the scientist gets desperate and creates a larger, unstable alien creature to overpower Stitch, basically a monster designed as a countermeasure. A towering experiment, less clever than Stitch, but way more brutal. That would have been the perfect way to raise the stakes and give us a full-on showdown. Stitch versus a bigger, meaner creation that represents everything he could have become if he stayed on the destructive path. And imagine that fight happening around the neighborhood, ripping through fences and palm trees, with Lilo trying to reach Stitch emotionally while chaos explodes around them. It would make his choice feel even more powerful. Not just escaping, not just surviving, protecting. One thing I did really enjoy was the action at the house. That sequence is a blast, fast, messy, and surprisingly intense for a family movie. It has the kind of lived-in chaos that fits the tone. Home is the battleground, not some random CGI arena. It also reinforces the theme that this little family's world, small as it is, matters enough to fight for. Performance-wise, the leads hold the movie up well. Maya Kealoha and Sydney Agudong carry a lot of emotional weight without overplaying it, and the supporting cast brings extra personality. Seeing familiar faces pop up was a nice bonus, and they mostly fit naturally into the world rather than feeling like celebrity distractions. Technically, the CGI is a major win. Stitch has to work visually or the whole movie falls apart. And here he actually feels present. His expressions, movement, and timing land well enough that you stop thinking about how he's made and just accept him as part of the scene. And that's the goal, right? If you're going to bring a character like Stitch in a live action, he can't look like a floating effect. You need him to feel like a real menace and a real companion at the same time. Overall, whether you're coming in as a longtime fan or you're totally new to the story, this 2025 live-action Lilo and Stitch is worth the watch. It's heartfelt without getting syrupy, funny without turning into pure slapstick, and it understands what makes Stitch work. He's not lovable because he's perfect. He's lovable because he's learning. And honestly, it's hard not to smile when he's tearing around the screen, causing chaos 1 minute, then quietly choosing family the next. Are live-action remakes necessary? Not always. But when they're done with care and when they preserve the emotional core, they could be a good time. This one gave me what I wanted most. A fun, wholesome adventure with real heart. And if Disney ever wants to do an extended cut or sequel, give me that bigger monster battle. Let Stitch throw down like he was built to, and then prove he's become something better. So this movie wastes zero time getting to the chaos. We've got an alien experiment loose on Earth, a fragile family situation on the brink, and a week-long countdown before everything falls apart. If you're here for heart, comedy, and that found family punch, this one clearly aims right for that lane. After a messy arrival in Kauai, Hawaii, the runaway creature, known as Experiment 626, ends up causing trouble almost immediately, including crashing a wedding reception before getting hauled off to an animal shelter. Meanwhile, two familiar alien figures, Jumba and Pleakley, beam down to Earth and do the classic undercover routine, posing as harmless tourists while secretly searching for their escapee. On the human side, the movie centers on Nanny Pelekai, a teen dealing with the impossible, raising her younger sister Lilo alone after their parents' fatal car accident. And you can feel how tight everything is: money, time, patience, energy. Nanny is basically carrying an entire household on her shoulders. Lilo, on the other hand, is lonely and struggling socially. Things spiral when she gets kicked out of hula class after an incident with her bully Myrtle, and that becomes another mark against the family's stability. Enter the social worker, Mrs. Kikoa, who visits the household and pretty much lays down the stakes. Nanny has 1 week to prove she can responsibly care for Lilo, or Lilo may be placed in a foster care. After Nanny overhears Lilo wishing for a real friend, their neighbor Tutu takes Lilo to the shelter. That's where 626 realizes he's being hunted, so he does the smartest survival move possible. He hides the extra limbs and antennas, pretends to be a weird-looking dog, and lets Lilo adopt him as cover. Lilo names him Stitch after Nanny makes a comment about repairing a rip in the car seat. A small moment that turns into one of those naming scenes. Nanny brings Lilo and Stitch to the restaurant where she works, and we meet David Kawena, her friend, and clearly the supportive presence she needs. But Stitch being Stitch, it goes sideways. A major accident leads to a fire at a table, and Nanny ends up losing her job. At the same time, a new threat joins the pressure cooker. Cobra Bubbles, a CIA agent investigating the alien arrival, links up with Kikoa while presenting himself as part of the same social services world. Kikoa basically demands Nanny find work immediately, and the film leans into a montage-like stretch where she tries multiple jobs: coffee shop, hotel, beach work, but Lilo and Stitch's antics keep blowing up her chances. As Nanny's life is collapsing, Lilo tries to do something surprisingly sweet. She starts teaching Stitch how to behave, introducing him to her world, including her love for Elvis Presley. Those scenes are meant to soften Stitch from walking disaster into something more human, or more Ohana, I guess. Eventually, Lilo helps Nanny land work as a surfing instructor, and for a moment the movie lets the sisters breathe. They surf, David's around, and you can finally see what their lives could look like if the chaos stopped. But the hunters close in again. Jumba and Pleakley attempt another capture, and in the struggle, Stitch unintentionally puts Lilo in serious danger. She gets pulled underwater and nearly drowns. That moment shifts everything. After Lilo recovers, Kikoa presents Nanny with an offer. The government can cover health insurance costs if Nanny gives up guardianship. Nanny doesn't want to, but she's exhausted, scared, and cornered. She reluctantly agrees. That night becomes their last night together, emotionally, and Stitch, overwhelmed by guilt, decides he doesn't deserve the family he just found. He quietly returns himself to the shelter. Up in alien command land, the Grand Councilwoman loses patience with the whole mission and cancels the arrangement with Jumba. Pleakley is ordered to take him back, but Jumba decides he's done playing by rules and goes after Stitch in a more aggressive way. The next morning, Kikoa and Bubbles arrive, but Lilo is gone. While the adults search, Lilo finds Stitch at the shelter, and that's when Jumba reappears to seize him. A chase and fight follow, and things escalate into full destruction. The conflict ends up wrecking the Pelicai's home. During the confrontation, Jumba drops the cruel truth out loud. Stitch originally stayed with Lilo purely as a shield to avoid being captured. Hearing it said like that crushes everyone, especially Stitch. And Stitch, filled with shame, gives himself up. Jumba teleports Stitch to his ship, planning to erase the empathy Stitch developed. But Lilo sneaks aboard, frees him, and together they force Jumba out. Then the ship crashes into the ocean, trapping Lilo and Stitch underwater. Stitch manages to push Lilo to safety, but can't get himself up. He lets her go and sinks, appearing to drown. Nanny and David reach Lilo, but she refuses to abandon Stitch. In a desperate attempt, they bring him up, and after a tense moment, David is able to revive him. On the beach, Bubbles and Pleakley arrive just before the Grand Councilwoman shows up to reclaim Jumba. She initially intends to take Stitch too, but after seeing how much he's changed, she decides to exile Stitch to Earth permanently, allowing him to remain with the family he chose. Kikoa offers a more stable guardianship plan. David and Tutu can officially help, allowing Lilo to stay in the home while giving Nanny room to rebuild her life. With Lilo's support, Nanny follows her dream of studying marine biology at UC San Diego, and thanks to Jumba's technology, she can still travel back to visit. Overall, the movie is basically two stories fused into one. The chaotic sci-fi chase and the grounded emotional struggle of two sisters trying not to be separated. The best moments come when the film slows down and lets the relationships speak. Lilo's loneliness, Nanny's stress, Stitch learning what family actually means. If you like heartfelt found family stories with comedy and a big emotional finish, it's aiming to give you exactly that, with a lot of action and mess along the way. We caught Lilo and Stitch 2025 as a family, and honestly, I walked in expecting a lazy cash-in, but I ended up having a pretty good time. The setup will sound very familiar if you know the animated classic. An impulsive alien experiment breaks loose, winds up on Earth, and, while trying to stay out of trouble, gets taken in as a pet by Lilo, played by newcomer Maya Kealoha, who's genuinely adorable on screen. Back in space, the authorities decide the best solution is to send the creature's creator, the unhinged scientist Jumba, along with Earth specialist Pleakley, to clean up the mess and bring the runaway back. And yes, once the Blue Menace arrives in Hawaii, chaos follows. The creature is less cute dog and more walking disaster, but that's part of the fun. He hides in plain sight, gets adopted, and suddenly you've got this odd little household trying to survive while the alien pursuit party closes in. The human side of the story still centers on the two sisters. Lilo, who is lonely, stubborn, and grieving, and Nanny, Sydney Agudong, who's trying to hold their lives together while the world keeps pushing back. Agudong plays it grounded and sincere, and that steady emotional center helps the movie a lot. Their relationship remains the heart of everything, still funny and warm at times, but also heavy in that we're barely keeping it together kind of way. As for the supporting cast, Zach Galifianakis and Billy Magnuson deliver light, comic energy rather than big laugh-out-loud moments. And Courtney B. Vance doesn't get a ton to do compared with what you might expect. The big scene stealer is, once again, the troublemaking alien himself, still the most entertaining presence in the movie, and the one character who never loses momentum. In terms of changes, this version mostly sticks close to the original plot. Think same blueprint, different paint. There are a few character tweaks and some added slapstick that leans more destructive than before. The pacing, though, is a mixed bag. The opening is promising. Space trial, exile plan, the hunt begins, and then the middle section can feel like it's rolling along a little too comfortably. At times, I wasn't sure if I was watching an extra sentimental TV episode or a set of family-friendly action comedy bits stitched together. The film has a couple of classic physical comedy bursts, but it occasionally plays things safe just when it could have leaned into the mischief more. Visually, it's a win. The CGI is strong, and Stitch and the other alien designs look convincing enough that you stop thinking about the technology and just accept them as there. The Hawaiian setting also feels more lived in and textured here, and the cultural touchstones land with more confidence than you might expect from a live-action remake. And yes, music fans will be happy. The film leans into Elvis Presley again, using those familiar, catchy tracks that instantly signal the tone, while still reinforcing the story's big theme. Family isn't just what you're born into, it's what you fight for. Do I still prefer the animated version? I do. The original has a charm and snap that's hard to replicate. And I won't pretend Disney isn't fully aware of the merchandise machine this title fuels. This movie basically prints plushies. But even with that cynicism in the background, the new one is entertaining enough to justify a theater trip, especially for families. Bottom line, it's not a reinvention. It's a solid crowd pleaser. A messy, sweet sci-fi comedy with heart, good effects, and just enough chaos to keep most viewers smiling. Verdict: fun, heartfelt, and family-friendly. Even if the cartoon still wears the crown. Disney's Lilo and Stitch 2025 is the studio's latest attempt to translate one of its animated favorites into a mostly live-action format. And it's a movie I had mixed feelings about. Sometimes charmed, sometimes frustrated, and often thinking about what worked better in animation. The story centers on 6-year-old Lilo, living on a small Hawaiian island with her older sister, Nanny. They're doing their best after losing their parents, but doing their best doesn't pay the bills or silence social services. Nanny's future plans are slipping away as she juggles work, debt, and the constant pressure of someone watching, ready to separate the sisters if things don't improve. That emotional foundation is still one of the strongest parts of the story. Then Stitch arrives, an alien experiment who looks cute enough to pass as a strange little dog or plush toy, but is considered a dangerous disaster by the people who made him. His escape to Earth kicks off a chase involving galactic authorities, the shady scientist behind his creation, and the local chaos that comes from something very not normal crashing into island life. Structurally, the movie moves in clear stages. Stitch's origin and escape, Lilo and Nanny's already struggling situation, a long middle stretch where Stitch's destructive behavior makes everything worse, and finally a more action-driven finale leading to the familiar emotional payoff, Stitch changing once he experiences what it means to be part of a real family. And that's where my experience split down the middle. On one hand, I can absolutely see younger audiences having a blast. Stitch's slapstick rampages are loud, messy, and designed to get big laughs. On the other hand, watching it as an adult, I couldn't stop focusing on how hard Nanny is fighting to keep their lives from falling apart, and how Stitch's chaos keeps smashing what little stability they have left. Instead of purely entertaining me, parts of it genuinely made me feel bad, because the damage lands heavier in live action. The movie clearly aims for emotional punches too, and there are several moments set up to hit you right in the chest. But for me, a lot of them didn't fully stick the landing. The intention is there. The execution is hit or miss. Technically, there's plenty to praise. The CGI work is strong, and Stitch blends into the live-action environment surprisingly well. Maya Kealoha is also a standout as Lilo. She brings personality, humor, and heart, even though the sound mix occasionally makes some of her lines harder to catch than they should be. But the real emotional anchor for me was Sydney Agudong as Nanny. Her performance carries the film's most human moments, and she feels like the beating heart of the story. One disappointment I didn't expect: the 3D. I'm usually optimistic about 3D showings, but here it felt so subtle that it may as well not have been there. Now, as someone who has seen the original animated film, I enjoyed it, but it's not one of those movies that's burned into my memory frame by frame, so I'm not approaching this as a strict compare and contrast review. That said, even without obsessing over differences, the remake still feels like it starts off a little too safe, like it's following a checklist rather than confidently reimagining the material. It improves as it goes, but that early box-ticking feeling is hard to ignore. Still, it's not all disappointment. I actually had a lot of fun with certain sequences, especially the more playful sci-fi moments. I also really liked Zach Galifianakis in the villain role, and the warp gun scenes were some of the movie's most enjoyable set pieces. In the end, while this version doesn't quite capture the effortless charm of the original animated movie, it does deliver enough humor, heart, and spectacle to make it worthwhile, especially if you're going in for a fun family watch. Final verdict: Lilo and Stitch 2025 is a warm, energetic entry in Disney's live-action lineup, with strong performances and solid effects, even if it doesn't fully match the magic of the original. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 and say it's definitely worth seeing at least once. Even though the VFX largely look convincing and the creature work keeps that distinctly alien weirdness intact, the movie still has an odd, slightly awkward vibe that never fully settles. A lot of it comes down to choices that feel off rather than outright disastrous, especially with Jumba. Zach Galifianakis is usually reliable, but here he feels like the wrong fit, and the film's adjustments to the character don't really help. Shifting him closer to the central villain role might have worked if it made him sharper or scarier, yet mostly just makes him feel mismatched and less satisfying than before. On the other hand, Billy Magnussen does a genuinely solid job as Pleakley, even if I can't help missing the more chaotic, openly ridiculous version of the character. There's a specific kind of humor that gets lost when you swap out the messy drag disguises for a cleaner hologram human look. It's a small change, but it speaks to a bigger pattern, smoothing down the strange edges that gave the original some of its spark. What's also surprising is how rushed everything feels. This version runs noticeably longer than the 2002 film, yet it somehow moves like it's trying to speedrun the story. Attempts to simplify and streamline end up doing the opposite. Certain threads feel looser, the pacing gets jumpier, and the reworked beats land with less impact than the animated version. The missing faces, trimmed action bits, and altered outcomes don't come across as bold improvements. They mostly register as weak spots, and there's a lingering sense that sticking closer to the source might have been the safer move. But then again, being too faithful would raise an even harsher question. Why make it at all? The uncomfortable truth is that most of what works here works because it's borrowing the bones of a story that already proved it could hit. The movie doesn't earn much extra credit for nailing the parts it didn't really invent. Still, once it finds its rhythm, it can be a pretty enjoyable ride. There are real laughs scattered throughout, several characters remain naturally charming, and the core theme, family, belonging, and finding connection in unlikely places, still has punch, even if the film doesn't dig into it as deeply as it could. Aside from a Jumba misfire, the casting is mostly strong, and the filmmaking is steady and professional even when it isn't particularly imaginative. Stitch, too, feels like an actual presence rather than a weightless CGI prop, even if a few live-action interactions have that faint, not quite touching the same space feeling. But as a chaos engine, he's still entertaining, and the rebellious streak of Lilo, played with real warmth by Maya Kealoha, helps keep the movie grounded when it risks turning into a checklist of familiar scenes. So I'm conflicted. On one level, it's clearly not in the same league as Lilo and Stitch 2002, and it's another example of Disney pouring resources into remakes that feel more obligatory than inspired, more about keeping a brand alive than telling a story that needed telling. There's also something oddly plain about the way it recreates the original, like it was assembled to function rather than crafted with genuine passion. And yet it's not a bad time. It has enough heart to occasionally land emotionally, and that counts for something, especially compared to some of the more lifeless copy-and-paste remakes. If you're watching with kids, it'll probably play very well, and for its runtime, it's generally pleasant company. Do I recommend it? Not wholeheartedly. It's perfectly watchable, sometimes even sweet, but I don't love the idea of endorsing the remake conveyor belt, especially when the superior version already exists and still hits harder. It also has that slightly cobbled-together energy that makes it feel like it might have been designed for streaming first. And honestly, you can kind of sense that in the way it's put together. When it succeeds, it's usually because the original story's strength is shining through, just a little dulled by the process of recreating something that didn't really need to be remade. Disney's live-action remakes have become a routine at this point, and most of them leave me feeling more tired than impressed. Still, I'll admit this one surprised me a bit. It's one of the more watchable entries in the studio's repeat the classics era, and I can't say I had a miserable time. I actually enjoyed parts of it. The problem is, enjoyable isn't the same as necessary, and this remake never really convinces me it deserves to exist alongside the animated original, let alone replace it. Lilo and Stitch is also a franchise that hits me right in the childhood. So when this adaptation was announced, my first reaction was basically the same as everyone else's, skepticism mixed with dread. But as the release got closer, I decided to cut it a little slack. Nostalgia is powerful, and I genuinely wanted it to work. Thankfully, I can say it lands on the good side of Disney's remake spectrum, even if it still comes with familiar drawbacks. What works even with my usual issues with Disney's live-action approach? I got pulled in faster than I expected. A big part of that is simply how much the story and characters already mean to me. But the movie also makes an effort to translate the original's tone into a real-world setting. It retains the emotional backbone, family, belonging, and the messy sweetness of finding your people, and I can easily see families having a good time with it. The cast is a major plus. Maya Kealoha carries the film as Lilo, which is crucial because so much of the movie depends on her being both lovable and believable. She's charming, naturally funny, and makes it easy to root for her. Sydney Elizabeth Agudong also does strong work as Nanny, and her performance sells the stress and responsibility of trying to hold everything together after their parents' death. Their relationship remains the heart of the story, and that part mostly comes through. And yes, hearing Chris Sanders return as Stitch is genuinely awesome. That voice is a big piece of the character's identity, and bringing it back adds a lot of authenticity, especially for anyone who grew up with the animated film. The supporting characters are fun, too. The film leans into the chaotic energy that Stitch brings into every scene, and the alien pursuit angle keeps the plot moving. Dr. Jakiba, Zach Galifianakis, and Pleakley, Billy Magnuson, add that extra layer of weirdness the story needs, and the movie generally handles the sci-fi silliness better than I expected. From a technical perspective, the alien effects look solid. The CGI doesn't feel cheap, and compared to some of Disney's other live-action updates, this is definitely one of the cleaner-looking ones. The pacing also helps a lot. Once the movie gets going, it moves at a steady clip and stays easy to follow. What doesn't even when the movie is working, it still can't fully recreate the spark of the animated version. That magic is hard to duplicate, and live-action remakes often feel like they're chasing something they can't quite capture. This one is no exception. The beginning also feels like it's in a hurry. The opening stretches through key setup beats quickly, and some of the changes early on felt distracting rather than refreshing. I wasn't always sold on the decisions being made, especially at the start where the film should be building trust with the audience. And while the story remains emotionally grounded overall, the finale doesn't hit as strongly as it should. The climax left me wanting a little more punch, more tension, more release, more oomph. It's not terrible, just a bit undercooked for something that should feel like the big emotional payoff. Overall, in the end, Lilo and Stitch 2025 is one of Disney's more decent live-action remakes. Pleasant, fairly entertaining, and clearly made with more care than the most soulless entries in this trend. But I still can't shake the feeling that I'd rather Disney aim higher than settle for not bad. It's a solid watch, especially for families or longtime fans curious to see the story in a new format. That said, if someone asked me which version to watch, I'd still point them to the original first. This remake is fine. Sometimes it's even really good. It just never becomes the kind of remake that feels essential. I thought the Zach Galifianakis / Billy Magnuson dynamic came out of the gate pretty decently, but over time it started to feel repetitive and less effective. Most of the supporting cast does solid work, and the visual effects are consistently strong. The bigger issue is the narrative. It's odd in a way that doesn't always feel purposeful, like it's missing a couple of key moments that would have made the journey more engaging. Courtney B., Vance's CIA agent role, in particular, doesn't add much. He often feels like an extra piece rather than a necessary one. Now, as someone who hasn't revisited the 2002 original recently, or at all, I still found this a fun watch overall. It played like light, easy entertainment, maybe a bit scrambled in its progression, but totally acceptable for a version clearly aiming at a younger crowd. I'm guessing there are added or reshuffled characters, can't say for sure, and that might be part of why the pacing sometimes feels like a patchwork. Maya Kealoha is the standout for me. Her performance feels effortless, natural, expressive, and believable, with a warmth that carries scenes even when the plot stumbles. Nanny also comes across as genuinely caring and grounded, which helps sell the emotional center. As for Stitch, I'll admit I'm biased because the character is iconic. The effects work and physical comedy land really well, and a live-action translation is better than I expected. That said, Stitch is extra unhinged early on, almost too much, though it improves a lot as the story settles. By the middle and final stretch, the character is better balanced, with more heart and more meaningful moments rather than non-stop chaos. Lengthwise, it actually didn't drag for me. If anything, I wouldn't have minded another 10 to 15 minutes to flesh out a few beats. When you reboot something after more than 2 decades, you hope it goes all in, bigger emotional swings, sharper story rhythm, and a little more wow. This version is good and enjoyable, but it doesn't fully feel like it emptied the tank. Still, I'd absolutely be on board for a quicker, more expansive sequel, preferably sooner rather than later, before Maya Kealoha gets much older. Scores screenplay/story/plot, 6.5 production value/impact, 7 development, 7.5 realism, 6.5 entertainment, 7 acting/live action, 7.5 filming/cinematography, 7.5 VFX, 9 music/score/sound, 6.5 depth, 6.5 logic, 4.5 flow/pacing, 7 adventure/action/comedy/sci-fi/drama mix, 7 ending, 7 the live-action remakes usually miss. Take honestly, this one surprised me. It's not perfect, but it's one of the rare Disney live-action remakes that actually understands what people loved in the first place. Watching kids react, laughing at the chaos, then getting emotional during the heartfelt parts, makes it clear why this story still works. What works best? Maya Kealoha as Lilo, full of personality, authentic energy, and real emotion. Stitch in live action. The CGI is impressive, and the character still has that wild charm. Hawaii on screen. The setting looks beautiful, and the Ohana message still hits. Verdict. Yes, some elements feel simplified or reorganized compared to the 2002 version, but the emotional core stays intact. The pacing is modern and kid-friendly, and it works as straightforward family entertainment. It's not trying to erase the animated film. It's offering a different version that succeeds on its own terms. If you want a warm, feel-good movie centered on family bonds and Hawaiian culture, this delivers. Don't get stuck measuring every detail. Just enjoy it for what it is. Recommended for families, Disney fans, anyone wanting something uplifting, especially if you're still recovering from certain recent remakes. Sydney Agudong, Maya Kealoha, Courtney B., Vance, Zach Galifianakis, and Billy Magnuson headline this 2025 comedy remake inspired by the 2002 film. The main storyline sticks closely to the original structure and even echoes some familiar dialogue, though it includes a handful of updates and small changes. Lilo, Kealoha, is a lonely Hawaiian girl struggling to connect with others. She's being raised by her older sister, Nanny Agudong, whose responsibilities and stress sometimes leave Lilo feeling overlooked and on her own. So I finally watched the live-action Lilo and Stitch, and honestly, it surprised me. The story kicks into gear once Lilo crosses paths with this strange little blue koala dog, voiced by Chris Sanders like in the original. And of course she insists on adopting him. What she doesn't know is that he isn't just some weird animal. He's actually Experiment 626, an alien creation built for chaos by the unhinged scientist Jumba, played by Zach Galifianakis. Jumba ends up sneaking around on Earth in a human disguise, teaming up with Pleakley to track Stitch down before things get even more out of control. And that's the big question the movie leans into. Will Stitch choose Hawaii or end up dragged back in his old life on his homeworld, Turo? Overall, I actually enjoyed this more than another recent Disney remake, Snow White. I didn't expect to say that. Is it on the same level as the animated original? No, not really. But did I have a good time with it? Yeah, I did. I've seen people complain about the editing and the story changes, saying they felt sloppy or unnecessary. I get where they're coming from, but personally, those things didn't bother me as much. If I had to point out something that pulled me out of the movie, it would be the casting/look for Nanny. To me, the actress looked like she had heavy dark makeup or something going on visually that made her feel a bit off in certain scenes. There were also a couple things I missed. I really wanted the ugly duckling moment, and I also kind of hoped for more of Zach Galifianakis, just being Zach Galifianakis, leaning into the full awkward/comedic energy. One of the cooler touches, though, is the nods for longtime fans. Tia Carrere, the original voice of Nanny, shows up as the social worker, and Jason Scott Lee appears as Nanny's boss, which is a fun detail. Now, don't expect anything revolutionary here. This movie plays it very safe and sticks to a familiar, family-friendly Disney formula. And clearly it worked. People have been showing up for it in huge numbers, with reports saying it's crossed the $1 billion mark globally. Still, even with all that success, I think it could have been stronger in a few areas. For one, the emotional core, the sister relationship, didn't hit as hard as I wanted. It felt like the movie didn't spend enough time letting that bond breathe. So some of the bigger moments didn't land with the impact they were clearly aiming for. Also, outside of Lilo, Nanny, and Stitch, a lot of the supporting cast felt forgettable. Their writing came off kind of basic, like they were there because the story required them, not because they added anything memorable. The real reason I stayed invested was Stitch himself. His energy, facial expressions, and chaotic little antics kept the movie moving, and I honestly found him ridiculously adorable. I also think it's fair to say this shouldn't be judged exactly like the animated film. This is a live-action version, and even if it follows the same iconic story beats, it's still its own kind of movie. The performances are what you'd expect from a Disney remake. A little exaggerated, lots of big emotions, characters swinging between super cheerful and randomly frustrated. But it works for the tone. The CGI is pretty solid too. The alien designs, ships, and effects generally look good and stay consistent throughout. It's not the greatest visual effects work ever made, but it's definitely respectable and doesn't look cheap. That said, I couldn't ignore some of the logic issues. The biggest ones were about money. The movie keeps pushing the idea that finances are a huge problem, but then there are moments where it feels like the characters suddenly have endless resources. I know it's made for kids, but once a movie makes money a major plot point, those contradictions become harder to overlook. Also worth mentioning, I actually hadn't seen the original animated movie. It never grabbed me growing up, so this remake was basically my first real introduction to the story. I watched it with like 20 kids too, which felt slightly embarrassing at first, but honestly, whatever. Grinning face with sweat in the end, I thought it was fine, fun, light, and easy to watch. I just didn't have that deep emotional attachment that longtime fans probably have. I did enjoy the Hawaiian setting and seeing the culture and landscapes brought to life in a more realistic way. And while Stitch was good here, I'm willing to bet the animated version still does him best. So yeah, not amazing, not top-tier Disney, but also not a disaster. I liked it more than I expected to, and I walked away entertained. Overall, I'd call Lilo and Stitch an average watch for me. Pleasant in spots, frustrating in others. One of the biggest positives was Maya Kealoha. This was my first time seeing her in a film, and she genuinely won me over. She brings a sweet, lovable energy that makes Lilo easy to root for, and she sells the emotional moments better than you'd expect for a newcomer. Disney's ongoing habit of turning animated favorites into live action is still a mixed bag, but this version stands out a little because of Dean Fleischerkamp's approach. Coming from Marcel the Shell with shoes on, he leans into a mix of offbeat humor and sincere emotion. For a while, it actually works. The movie still feels connected to the spirit of the 2002 classic, even if it smooths out some of the sharper edges. Lilo, for example, is a touch less chaotic and abrasive than before, but Kealoha makes up for it with warmth and sincerity. The main story beat, Lilo bonding with Stitch, is still the core, and that relationship remains the movie's easiest win. But what really drives the heart of this remake is the focus on Lilo's relationship with Nanny, played by Sydney Elizabeth Agudong. Their dynamic carries a lot of the emotional weight. Grief, pressure, and the fear of being separated all hang over them. The movie spends more time showing Nanny's personal struggles and what she's sacrificing, which raises the stakes in a way that's honestly effective. When the film slows down and lets the sisters' relationship breathe, it's at its best. Where things start to wobble is with the expanded supporting material. Some added pieces feel more like, because it's live action, it needs more stuff than meaningful improvements. Jumba and Pleakley are a prime example. What worked as big, cartoonish comedy doesn't always translate cleanly here. Their humor becomes inconsistent, and some of the choices around their presentation lean a little uncanny instead of charming. On top of that, Cobra Bubbles doesn't hit as hard this time around. The way his role has been reshaped and spread out makes him feel less memorable, which is a shame because he's usually a strong presence in this story. That said, not everything outside the main cast is amiss. Characters like David and a few of the more grounded additions help keep the movie from floating off into pure CGI chaos, and they add a bit of human warmth that the remake needs. Visually, the film has its moments. There are nods to the original, and the sci-fi elements occasionally give the movie room to be playful and imaginative. As it moves toward the finale, it starts to branch further away from the animated version, building toward a climax that tries to hit the themes of family, belonging, and connection in a big, crowd-pleasing way. It lands reasonably well, even if it sometimes feels like the movie is working extra hard to prove it has the same emotional punch as the original. My biggest issue is that it still falls into the usual live-action remake traps. It's longer than it needs to be, some new characters and changes feel unnecessary, and a lot of the uniqueness gets replaced with something more polished, but also more generic. The animated film had a weird, specific identity. This version keeps the heart in broad strokes, but it doesn't always keep the same spark. In the end, I wouldn't call it a bad remake, just an uneven one. Kealoha is an excellent Lilo, and Stitch is still the standout, delivering most of the charm and laughs. Agudong's Nanny is solid, especially when the script gives her something real to play. But several supporting performances and creative changes don't work as well, and some of the movie's extra padding drags down the momentum. So yeah, average overall, with a few genuinely good highlights. Enough to keep it from being one of Disney's worst live-action conversions, but not quite strong enough to replace the original's magic. At least the CGI for Stitch holds up, because if it didn't, the whole thing would fall apart fast. I caught Lilo and Stitch, featuring Sydney Agudong, at her feet. Chris Sanders back again as the voice of Stitch. Yes, the same guy who helped create the original and has done other notable voice work. Zach Galifianakis, The Hangover films, Only Murders in the Building, Courtney B. Vance, Space Cowboys, TV roles, and newcomer Maya Kealoha in her first film role. This is the live-action take on the 2002 animated movie, and even though I haven't rewatched the original in a while, my wife has it on at her home daycare pretty often, so I got the plot accuracy report at home. According to her, and honestly, it tracks, the remake sticks pretty close to the main storyline. The setup is familiar but still works. Lilo, Maya, and Nanny, Sydney, are sisters in Hawaii trying to keep their lives together while the world keeps piling on. Meanwhile, out in space, a chaotic alien experiment, Stitch, is deemed a problem that needs to be erased. His creator, Jumba, played here by Galifianakis, gets tasked with retrieving him, and once Stitch bolts for Earth, things turn into a full-on chase. On Earth, the fun starts when Lilo mistakes Stitch for a strange-looking dog and bonds with him almost instantly. From there, the movie leans into what audiences actually show up for: misadventures, close calls, goofy fish-out-of-water moments, and the constant scrambling to avoid capture, including a not-so-graceful duo of pursuers. Courtney B. Vance adds another layer to the pursuit as an agent determined to track down what's causing all this chaos. What really anchors the film, though, is the heart of the story: family, the messy, imperfect kind that still chooses each other. The Ohana theme remains the emotional spine, and the movie keeps bringing it back in ways that feel sincere rather than forced. And yes, there's plenty of Elvis, which I personally enjoyed a lot. If you're an Elvis fan, you'll probably be smiling through a good chunk of the soundtrack choices. A few quick thoughts on what worked best for me. Nanny's casting is a big win. The performance brings warmth and grit, and it feels believable as someone holding everything together with sheer determination. David translates surprisingly well into live action. Still sweet, still goofy, still easy to root for. A couple of additions, including an older supporting character, give the remake a slightly expanded feel, even if not every original character makes the cut. Stitch's CGI is the real make-or-break element, and thankfully it's strong. He looks expressive and present in scenes instead of feeling pasted in. I wasn't completely sold on every single voice choice, especially for Jumba at times, but I did like the overall portrayal, particularly when the character is in human form. The film also drops a few little moments that feel like it's keeping the door open for more, which makes sense given how audiences tend to show up for this franchise. Bottom line, I had a great time with it. It's PG, about 1 hour 48 minutes, and it feels like a solid crowd pleaser, especially for families. I'd absolutely recommend it for kids, and honestly, it'll probably be one people rewatch a lot once it hits streaming. If I'm rating it in pure enjoyment, and did it deliver what it promised, terms, 5 stars for me. This movie hit in more ways than I expected. It works as a fun, emotional family story, and it quietly expands the world in a way that leaves room for what could come next. Honestly, it was handled with a lot of care and confidence. I'll admit up front, I'm slightly biased, but not in the way most people are. I didn't grow up holding the original Lilo and Stitch as my core childhood Disney film. My nostalgia era was more The Little Mermaid and The Lion King, the ones that give me that instant, warm, kid-like glow. I always respected Lilo and Stitch for what it stood for. Family isn't just who you're born with, it's who you choose and who chooses you back. That message has always been the strongest part of the story. That said, while I liked the original, I never thought its animation looked as polished as Disney's best work. At times it felt surprisingly simple compared to other classics. This live-action version, though, feels more present and emotionally real in a way that helped the story land for me. A few moments that felt odd or unexplained in the animated movie were adjusted here, so they make more sense, and I appreciated those little fixes. One of the biggest wins is the cast. This version really lets the performers bring their energy and heart into the characters, and you can feel it. Whether you're an animated-only person or you're open to live-action remakes, the core of Lilo and Stitch is still powerful, so it's honestly hard to go wrong revisiting it. Now switching to my other perspective. The original animated film was a huge part of my childhood, so when a live-action version was announced, I was instantly excited and also nervous. The first teaser mattered a lot to me because Stitch's design could have easily gone wrong. But once I saw him, I was relieved. He still looked like Stitch, just updated for a more realistic style. After finally watching the full movie, it mostly matched what I hoped for. The plot isn't a full reinvention. It follows the same general path as the animated version, so it doesn't try to shock you with a brand new storyline. But within that familiar structure, the pacing is solid, the emotions are clear, and the storytelling stays easy to follow without feeling lazy. The characters remain the heart of everything. Lilo is lovable and layered. Nanny's stress and responsibility feel heavier in live action, and the supporting characters add warmth without stealing focus. The casting choices work, and the performances feel genuine rather than forced. Visually, Hawaii is a major highlight. Filming on location gives the movie texture and atmosphere that you can't fake. The cinematography captures the setting beautifully, and the score supports the emotion without constantly shouting for attention. As for the structure, the opening is pretty straightforward and not particularly surprising, but it gets the job done.